أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, we have a question in front of us that we need to answer. And the question is there a good deed that you can do that after doing that good deed you can safely say that I have repaid my parents? Like, is there a good deed that after you're done going through that good deed, you have gotten even, you have become even with your parents, you have essentially compensated them for everything that they have done for you? Is there a good deed like that? That you and Pops are now flush? Can we say that? Is there a good deed like that you can commit? Well, let's find out. Imam Al-Bukhari rahimahullah brings this hadith from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يجزي ولد والده إلا أن يجده مملوكا فيشتريه فيعتقه. Very interesting hadith. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah brings this hadith from Sufyan al-Thawri, who brings this hadith from Suhail. Just remember these two names because I want to comment on them. Sufyan al-Thawri and Suhail. Suhail says, I got this hadith from my father, who got it from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, a child has simply no way of repaying his parents. You can't get even with your parents. With the exception of perhaps one deed. And that is a situation where a child found his or her parent as a slave, and then he bought them, purchased them, and then he set them free. That emancipation might be the only deed that if you were to commit, you can say that I have kind of done justice to everything my parents have done. That's about the only deed that comes close to it. Let's unpack this hadith real quick. What is going on here? Well, remember this hadith comes to us from who? Sufyan al-Thawri. Who's Sufyan al-Thawri? Sufyan al-Thawri this is one name you want to know, because as you'll learn soon enough, inshallah, I have a crush on Sufyan al-Thawri. He's one of the greatest scholars of hadith in Islamic history, period. Especially in his time and before, they used to say Sufyan al-Thawri huwa amirul mu'minina fil hadith. Arguably the greatest scholar of hadith up to his time. Yahya ibn Ma'in was one of the great authorities on hadith. Think of Yahya ibn Ma'in as like a rating agency for hadith scholars. Kind of like, Moody's, they give a grade to the bonds the different companies issue. Well, Yahya ibn Ma'in was like that. He would grade different narrators of hadith on how good they were, how reliable they were. Yahya ibn Ma'in says, when it comes to Sufyan al-Thawri, la yuqasu bihi ahad. No one is at the level of Sufyan al-Thawri. No cap. And Imam Ahmad, the great Imam Ahmad, the founder of the Hanbali school of thought, he says, Atadri man al-Imam? Do you know who the Imam was? He says, Al-Imam Sufyan al-Thawri la yataqaddamuhu ahadun fi qalbi. He says, the Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, no one comes ahead of him in my heart. And subhanAllah, one of our scholars, Shu'aib, he used to say, I fear that Allah will bring Sufyan al-Thawri on the day of judgment. And He will put him in front of the people of his day and age. And Allah will tell the people who were alive in his time that sure, you didn't get to see your Prophet. Maybe that's why you weren't as good of Muslims as you could have been. Maybe that's why you didn't live up to your spiritual capacity. Sure, your excuse is that you didn't get to see your Prophet, but you did get to see Sufyan al-Thawri. This is Sufyan, subhanAllah. They used to say when Sufyan al-Thawri would begin, when he would begin talking about death and hereafter, for a few days now you couldn't benefit from him and you couldn't study with him. He would be in such a state of khushu', in such a different level and different wavelength, like he's so overwhelmed with fear, now you can't take hadith from him for a few days because death and the idea of death and standing in front of Allah was so real to them. They lived their life as if today was the last evening and tomorrow is going to be the last morning, or today I lived my last morning. Sufyan al-Thawri brings this hadith from Suhail ibn Abi Salih. Why am I telling you this? Because Suhail is a very interesting case. Suhail was one of those individuals that the biographers write that towards the end of his life, he suffered from memory loss. Meaning, he was a great scholar and transmitter of hadith, but towards the end of his life, perhaps Parkinson's or like Alzheimer's, something kicked in and he had a memory loss. So they document, subhanAllah, they document which were his students who narrated from him before the memory loss, and they document who narrated from him after the memory loss. And anyone who narrates from him after the memory loss, we don't take the hadith seriously. We downgrade the hadith to da'if or weak hadith because now we can't trust if Suhail narrated the right information. SubhanAllah, to this extent they went to make sure that the hadith and the words of the Prophet ﷺ were faithfully passed on to the next generation. That's amazing. One of those students who transmitted from him before the memory loss was Sufyan al-Thawri. But just to be sure, maybe somebody is doubtful and skeptical that I don't really know. Did really Sufyan get it from him before the memory loss? Well, Imam Muslim, the great Sahih Muslim, the author of it, the Imam Muslim does us a big favor. He brings the same hadith from a classmate of Sufyan al-Thawri. Because Suhail is a teacher. I'm sure he had multiple students. One of them was Sufyan al-Thawri. I'm sure he had other students. Another student was Jarir ibn Hazm. He was a classmate, a colleague of Sufyan al-Thawri. He also narrates this hadith, and where does it end up? In Sahih Muslim. That gives us confidence that alhamdulillah, Suhail did really say this, and inshallah it's an authentic hadith. My dear brothers and sisters, I'm going through slightly advanced details to help you appreciate just how sophisticated and meticulous our tradition is. That this is how the words of the Prophet were preserved. This Jarir, the classmate of Sufyan al-Thawri, they say that towards the end of his life, he also suffered from memory loss. His kids were scholars of hadith. When they found out that their father is suffering from memory loss, you know what they did? They shut him down. They banned and barred any other students from taking hadith from their father. And they said, Dad, we love you, but you're not going to narrate hadith anymore. Because you're transmitting the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and we are no longer sure if you are transmitting it properly. So they banned him, dude. They shut him down. SubhanAllah, business closed. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us appreciate our tradition, and that's why I kind of went into that level of detail. This hadith that I shared with you, where the Prophet ﷺ said that a child cannot repay their parents, except if they emancipated their parents. This deals with the issue in fiqh, and fiqh is a study of halal and haram in our deen. The issue in fiqh is, can you have a slave that is your family member? That's the issue. Now obviously we have to be sensitive here because slavery has a very dark past in American history. So we have to be sensitive. But we also have to declare that in Islamic history, slavery did not exist in such a twisted form, where Islam went above and beyond to make sure that not only were the slaves freed, but their well-being was ensured. It's unbelievable, and you can quote me on this. Before 100 years were over after the Prophet ﷺ, Abdullah ibn Abi Layla, the great jurist, he tells us, he by the way passed away 87 Hijri, which is about 70 years after the Prophet ﷺ. He says by his time, every major scholar in every major Islamic city was an ex-slave. So someone asked him, what are you talking about, dude? Well, in Makkah at that time, he says, the great scholar, probably the greatest scholar of Makkah at that time is who? Mujahid ibn Jabr and Sa'id ibn Jubair, both are ex-slaves. What about Kufa? Al-Hakam ibn Utayba, he's an ex-slave. What about Damascus? Makhul, he's an ex-slave. Everywhere you go, Medina, who's the great scholar? Zayd ibn Aslam, an ex-slave. You know what's happening here? These ex-slaves, not only were they rapidly freed, but they had upward mobility in society that they could become the greatest authority in their city. 100 years have not gone since the Prophet passed away, and ex-slaves are the leading scholars in their city. Now that's amazing. Why is that? Why were they so rapidly freed? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, hadith comes in Sahih Muslim, whoever frees a slave, then every limb that was freed from slavery, Allah will free your limb from the hellfire for them. Limb for limb. And this essentially tells you, if you partially owned a slave, if you free just your portion, Allah will free you from the hellfire. And some scholars, they go as far as to say when part of a slave is freed, the entire slave is freed. That means, inshallah, that will become your insurance policy on the Day of Judgment. The grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was told this hadith, he on the spot freed his slave Marjana that he had paid 10,000 dirhams for. He heard this hadith and he was so inspired, freed a slave. Abdullah ibn Umar, by the time he died, had freed 1,000 slaves. How? And whenever he had spare money, he would go to the marketplace. Slavery was still a thing back in the day because prisoners of war were coming in. Every time he had spare money, he would go to the marketplace, buy a slave, set him free. And some of his slaves started to notice that any slave who got a little religious, he would free him. So a lot of them, what they started to do when Abdullah ibn Umar would pass by, they would like pray a little extra longer, quote a little extra hadith. So he would start freeing them, and people started telling Abdullah ibn Umar, your slaves are fooling you, right? They're like faking piety whenever you pass by, just so they can get free. They're trying to pull a fast one on you. Abdullah ibn Umar says, "Man khada'ana lillahi in khada'na lahu." SubhanAllah, so beautiful. He says, whoever fools me to do good deeds for Allah, I'm okay with being fooled. Whoever deceives me in doing good deeds, I'm okay with being deceived. SubhanAllah. So, Islam went above and beyond. So now to answer the question, if someone owns a slave and they find out that they were a family member, on the spot, that slave is free. This is the overwhelming majority of India. In fact, they say the person who owns a slave and he finds out it was a parent or a brother or whatever, they don't even have to utter a word. They don't have to say you're freed, or they don't have to write a contract. On the spot, automatically, without moving a finger, that slave automatically achieves freedom. Why? They say the moment that that person had owned that slave, that moment of ownership was the moment of freedom. You never owned it. That family member never came into your possession because they are a family. They are to be dignified. Immediate freedom. And this leads me to my final point. Some scholars, they say this hadith is not to be taken literally. It should be taken figuratively. Why? The Prophet ﷺ, what they say is actually saying that a parent can never get even with what their parents have done for them. Like in terms of ihsan and favor, a child can never be even with their parents. This exception is the Prophet ﷺ telling us how impossible it is. Like as impossible as it is for you to own a family member as a slave, as impossible it is for you to repay your parents for the favors they've done. It's kind of like when someone says, yeah, sure, I'm going to get into Harvard. Yeah, I'm going to get into Harvard when pigs start flying. You know how they say that? Meaning, I'm not going to get into Harvard. The Prophet ﷺ is saying the same thing. You can't get even with your parents. Yeah, about the only time is if they were to be your slave and you set them free, which, as you know, never happens because ownership never occurred. So that's another way of understanding this hadith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us of those who inshallah spend our lives doing good deeds and inshallah pleasing our parents. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi.